another week of Engagement That Scales with Rachel Happe. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Shannon. Happy Friday.
We've made it to another Friday. We've done it.
Goodness.
I hope. I'm gonna have to edit this. That's bad. I don't know what I was gonna say, but we're
okay,
so
Friday. It's Friday. It's like...
Maybe I won't edit it out. Maybe I'll leave it in.
Ashleigh is here.
Ashleigh is here. Yay!
Hi. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. This is just like a conversation. And the first thing I want to do is just catch up and hear what you've been up to. And I know there's a little furry thing is one thing you've been up to, but
yes.
Yeah, like, tell me what you've been up to.
Yes, I did get a little furry thing. I am the proud owner of a new German Shepherd puppy. First time owning a puppy. She's about 8 weeks old, and I'm just kind of getting into learning that she chews on everything, including mommy's toes and mommy's fingers. But it's been great. And one of the things why I purchased a puppy during this time is that the weather's changing. Located in Chicago, even though it's interesting. The weather's actually been really nice over the past few days. It's been like 60. Yeah, so I'm enjoying that. But as we're looking at how things have been happening, like during the pandemic, and I was like, I just want some puppy self-care. That's really.
I have a big. Actually, she's tall. She's not that big.
Okay.
Fluffy Labradoodle.
Wonderful. What color?
She's apricot, so she's like
nice.
Yeah, and she blends into our tan sofa very well. But she is such a love bug. Like all she wants to do is, and sometimes it gets a little oppressive. All she wants to do is be on us. But it's from a mental health perspective.
Yes.
The world is like nuts and you can't go out and you can't see people. She's always super happy to see.
I know.
And it's delightful.
I love it. And that's exactly why I got her, because I figured, having a puppy is going to force me to take a break from screen time. Very important. Stop the consumption of media. Again, very important. Just get outside, get some fresh air. I bought my first house, and I know this last year, but this is the most time I've spent just in my yard and enjoying, the outside. So yeah, it's been great so far. Great first week. How about yourself?
We take our dog out. Well, so I will caution you. You may already have a fenced-in backyard. We did not. And the fence project was one of those domino effect things.
Yep.
Which is, if we put in a fence, then we need to do this. And then if we do that, we need to do this.
Project management of the home.
It just turned into a massive project pretty quickly. It's over. It's all good. But
good.
We were like, all that for the puppy. She
yeah.
got really expensive really fast.
Yeah.
So that's my only caution with the you end up, it's the same as kids too, right? You have a kid and you're like, I don't really need anything more than diapers and a bed and whatever.
Let me tell you, Pinterest has been great. I had a whole puppy board. I had a whole list of things, been doing the research. So one of the things I do notice though is that she just chews on everything. She was chewing on my deck. She's chewing on rocks and sticks. It's like having a baby. I don't have children, but I imagine this is what caring for a young life would look like. Just keeping things out of their mouth all of the time.
It's all so individualistic, which actually gets into the DEI thing, right?
Right.
Before you're a parent of a puppy or a child, you think, oh, parenting is going to be like X.
Yeah.
And then you get your puppy or your child, and all your friends are like, well, you just do this. And you're like, that's
not working.
And then you start feeling anxious because you're like, maybe I'm doing it wrong.
Yes.
And you've got to keep reminding yourself that it's your kid and they're or puppy and they're different. because we had a little chewing problem, but not a huge chewing problem.
Mm-hmm.
I will say oil and pepper.
Oil and pepper. Okay. I'm actually going to write that down.
Rub that on the woodwork. Or whatever she's
chewing on.
Yeah. I mean, not your like, you know, the hard stuff that she's chewing on.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, but I do love your point about, you know, it being very individualistic and getting a sense of like, you know, when we talk about DE&I, really getting an understanding of really who it is that you're working with and being open and checking in with yourself to be able to have like, not only the conversations, but even like the mindset to be like, this is different. Mm-hmm. This is something that, you know, I may not have experienced. This is something that's new and exciting and a little scary, you know, at the same time. So I think it's really important to just check in with yourself and allow yourself that space to feel that.
Well, what I've been chewing on lately, speaking of chewing, but mentally chewing.
Love it.
I've been chewing on anything. Is how fixed some people's mindsets are. And I've had this conversation with other people because I was an exchange student in high school, and I navigated a couple of different, I learned very early on in life for a variety of reasons that context mattered. The community context that I was in mattered.
Absolutely.
And, it's taken me years and years and years to understand that that is not true for everybody.
Yeah.
Meaning some people really live in a very similar environment their whole lives. And so they don't recognize, they can't even mentally understand different contexts.
Yeah.
And that is where you get a lot of the toughness, because you start making a lot of assumptions in that situation about people's expectations, how they understand what you're telling them, all sorts of things like that, which is like the root of all our issues, probably.
No, and I completely agree with you. And one of the things that I have struggled even within myself is to do a self check-in and understand that not everybody comes from my perspective, or not only that, wants to understand the perspective, right? So it becomes very challenging, I would say, to try to have those conversations when certain individuals seem like they're committed to just misunderstanding. Because to your point, the cultural context, they don't quite understand, or they're not quite open to even taking a look and hearing what you're saying, right? You know, we see this a lot.
The words in the same way.
Yeah. Language definitely matters. Language, and I would even take it a step further, language and context matters. And, you know, you see this a lot in online spaces. I don't know if, you know, you like to go through different discussion forums and take a look at the comments and, you know, the back and forth. I try not to get too into it, but
as a people watcher, I am obsessed with how people talk.
Yeah. And it's, you know, it's very interesting to see how the dynamic, you know, it'll start from one position and then it'll end up like way over here, but there's like a fundamental middle part that was missing on both parties, it seems like, you know. And it's different when you're online. You have the luxury of being able to take a step back because you're not in it. You're essentially like watching it unfold.
It's shocking how many people don't use that luxury though.
Yeah. It's just
like they just like fly.
They just don't.
And you're like,
Yeah. You know, I do have a philosophy that I am kind of just working on, you know, continuing to work on within myself, is to always, like I said, take that step back, and like that self-awareness piece, I think, is so important, because if you don't understand what's happening within yourself or what's going around you, trying to have a difficult conversation in a different context from where you're thinking, very difficult. and not productive.
It's so interesting because I've also been thinking a lot, and this happens a lot online, but it also happens a lot offline.
Mm-hmm.
There's all these loaded words.
Yes. Language matters. And so does context.
There's so many loaded words. And I've been having this conversation online with a group that I'm in. And they are rejecting it because they think everyone should understand this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, you should never call somebody this.
Yeah.
Thing, right? Yeah. It's a label, right?
Yeah.
And as soon as you label someone, you're taking their voice from them.
Absolutely.
Right? And they're so enraged about the topic that they can't step back and say, like, and I'm like, stop calling anybody anything.
Yeah.
Their behavior can be perceived one way, and you can say to them,
yeah,
perceive this as, but as soon as you assign them an adjective.
Well, you know what, Rachel, it's interesting because what you're talking about requires a lot of work on the individual. That's kind of what I have been noticing when you're having like difficult conversations in, any organizational context, is that it takes a lot of work for someone to understand that I should perhaps phrase this differently, to your point, as opposed to just saying X, because thinking about the listener, how are they going to perceive that? Is this going to be helpful or hurtful to what I'm trying to convey? But it takes a lot of work to stop in the moment and kind of think through that process.
I would say yes, but once it becomes a habit, no.
Yes, but you have to start somewhere.
Yes, it's true. It's just, and I think we have such in our organizations particularly, we have such a mandate for what we think of as efficiency, which is like there's all sorts of issues with that are tangential. But because of that context, we're trying to have the shortest possible conversations with people rather than the most collaborative conversation. Collaboration takes time, right? Like it takes time, right?
Absolutely.
And so then we just we get frustrated because the conversation isn't going the way we want it to. And that's when people tend to whip out the adjectives to try and just shut down the conversation. And that's exactly when it blows up, usually. But it's interesting. So what's your advice for getting to that place where you can be self-aware about what you're doing and can help people think through how they're being perceived?
Yeah, I mean, and that, that's kind of a difficult question. I would say that it's individualistic, right? What works for me may not work for someone else. So I've really been taking a look at just, self-care in general and what I need to be able to do to be in the mindset to have some of these difficult conversations without getting frustrated. That I'm kind of a very reactionary, emotionally excitable individual. So I've had to really take a step back and not so much.
I think you're gaslighting yourself. Like, I think you are a person and we all have emotions and are reactive.
Yes. I would say that is true. Yes. But I also know that because I just have an excitable person. I mean, I've always been that way, right? So it's one of those things where I've had to really build in time to stop and think as opposed to just reaction, like right off the cuff, like that's not a thing. You're not doing that. How difficult, how rude, like that sort of thing. Because when you're able to have like that interpersonal communication, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. It's how you're being perceived, the tone of voice. I mean, there are all these little, pieces that go into it.
Yeah.
So when I'm having, those difficult conversations or trying to collaborate, really working on like that listening piece, listening to understand as opposed to listening to respond.
Yeah. That's so hard.
And to your, that's so hard. It is very difficult. But it'll be helpful and beneficial, especially when you're in a consultative role where you have to have these conversations with individuals, because to your point earlier, language matters, context matters, and they may not understand what you're talking about, not necessarily because they're committed to misunderstanding, but it may just be like a lack of, they may just not know.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I've had to, really get comfortable with, is like, sometimes, Ashleigh, people just don't know. Now, if they know and they don't care, that's a different conversation, right? So it's like
that white space is really hard when people don't know what they don't know.
Right.
Is that the Dunning-Kruger effect? Something. Anyways, like it's really hard to help people see something that they fundamentally don't think is out there.
Right.
That exists in the world.
We see that, and as community managers, we see, like we were talking about earlier, we see a lot of that just floating online, just in multiple different spaces. Like there is again, we talked about taking a step back. We have the luxury of being able to do that as people who are viewing it, unfold right before you. But for someone that's in it, it takes like that extra amount of like effort. So I've really just been, focusing on kind of centering myself and slowing down. I think that is also very important. And listening, it's that whole active listening piece. That's something that, I've been committed to working on, because you're going to have to deal with people, especially in online community management, cross-functional teams, competing priorities. So when we talk about, diversity and inclusion at the organizational level, that could just include, how do I collaborate with another team that doesn't get an understanding of what I'm trying to do for community, or why this is important, or why we should take a look at this thing over here, because again, they don't get it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been working with my daughter for a while. She's anxious. Anxious, and she has a brain that takes in a lot of information. And so when she was little, that was completely overwhelming. Like it's like the CPU was getting too hot, literally.
Yeah.
She couldn't deal with it.
I can relate.
Yeah, like she'd just explode. Literally, she'd just explode. And we've been working with her, and we finally started giving her this medication that just pauses her a little bit. It reduces her anxiety just and the impact on her ability to listen and learn without reacting is enormous. And then I'm also in a DEI committee for a volunteer role that I do, and there's been some issues going around. We had a call this week, and I was laughing because I forgot that we had a call. It was an evening call, and my husband had made me a nice martini because we were watching election returns, and I was like, I just needed a drink.
Yeah.
So
I just needed, yes, I hope you had several.
Drinking on this meeting.
Yeah.
I happened to have a drink. And it started off, people were really tense because we were dealing with this difficult situation where people were not understanding each other.
Yes.
And we ended it very relaxed and just enjoying the connection between us.
Yes.
And the woman on staff, you could just see like things draining out of her. And you were like, and it really reinforced to me that you having difficult conversations when you're tense.
Yeah.
Or if you can't find the connection and social piece.
Yes.
You shouldn't even try and have the more difficult conversation, because like you're setting up this and
If you're going in like this.
Yeah. Like you can see it in people and you're like,
well, and that's what we talk about. Yeah. Like, and, you know, with communication, like, it's not just like we said earlier, it's not just what you say, like it's how you're saying it. So if you've got kind of like that clenched, like, you know, it's going to be off-putting sometimes to someone who's trying to have a conversation. So when we talk about, you know, online communities, or just to your point, like that social piece, like humans are very social, right? So they're looking for that connection and those bonds and those relationships, but also getting an understanding too, that emotions are part of the human experience. So how you experience and process your own emotions going to be completely different from how someone else will process and understand and experience their emotions. But it's like, how do you continue to find that middle ground? That's what I really work on. Like, what do you need? What does someone need from me? Or how can I help you understand my perspective? So coming at it from that collaborative piece, while again, stopping to think and checking my own emotions. I get frustrated sometimes. I'm like, what about this are you not understanding? Yeah. But, you know, kind of get back to be like, this is an opportunity for me to share my perspective and learn a little bit about yours, to get that middle ground so that we can accomplish whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish. Because I'm very deliverable oriented. So I'm like, what do you need from me? How can I help you get to the space?
Is you're sitting in the mental space of possibility.
Yes.
Rather than limitations.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. Instead of fighting over the cookie we have now, you're kind of saying,
right,
shift this to like,
yes,
what do we both want that can bring us together?
Yeah. 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 And you know, it sounds like so simple, but it does make a difference sometimes. Like if you can
to your point, it's not simple to understand somebody else's perspective and what motivates them. Just
the process. I'm sorry. I mean that the process that I have is like, it sounds like a really simple process to be like, you know, stop. I'm very formulaic in that. And I've had to be, right? Because when you get that, you know, emotional kind of reaction, I always think like, is this going to help what we're trying to do? And if the answer is no, which oftentimes it's not, then it's like, okay, what do I need to do to help move along? Because I understand myself and the fact that I'm very deliverable oriented. It's like how we're feeling is how we're feeling, but I need to check this off my box. So it's like, I need to check this off my list. So yeah, I mean, it's just a kind of an ongoing and or you know, organic process. So I always tell people, try to come from a place of self-empathy and like outward empathy as well. Like everybody's got emotions, everybody's got passions, everybody's got goals, everybody's trying to do different things. So how can I, as you know, like a community manager, how can I help facilitate that collaboration? Because as you well know, Rachel, like in our work, they're cross-functional. Communities can't exist in a vacuum. We can't exist without the people. We can't exist without the users. We can't exist without, you know, our collaborative partners and other departments. We can't do that, right? So it's like,
you know, we're mentally, what I've mentally found useful related to that is in a variety of roles, I've been an analyst, and having that analytical, like semi-detached perspective, meaning, and when I can do that, I can kind of say you're frustrated. And if I can remove myself from the frustration, meaning I can say you're frustrated, but it's not a personal attack on me.
Absolutely.
Then I can come to you and I can actually just straight out say, I understand you're frustrated.
Yep.
Like what would make you like you actually can name the emotion and dig into it.
Right.
versus react to it. And
Right.
say, this is my emotion to defend myself against.
Right.
Right. Which is, gets no one anywhere.
Right.
So that's the process I try to take, which is like detach yourself from, and you have, to your point, which is a great one. I found you have to, before you can do that, you actually have to learn to be compassionate with yourself and say, I don't.
Yes.
Maybe I triggered that. Like maybe they're responding to something I said, but I still need to detach myself from it.
Absolutely.
And back in a neutral way, because that emotion is telling me and them something that's important.
Right. I aspire to kind of maintain that emotional neutrality when you're having like those difficult conversations, and it is hard. And, you know, especially as it relates to DE&I stuff. I mean, I just get so, you know, passionate about things, but, you know, as I'm learning, to your point earlier, not everybody understands. Some people don't want to understand. And to me, it's such a core foundation to who I am as a person. You know, maintaining that neutral space. I try to provide inclusive practices elsewhere as well when we're having the conversation, where it's like, you may not get this piece.
Fundamentally, and I just, I'm working on this book, but I had Hugh McLeod do a gaping void for me.
Okay.
What I had written on, or what I do have written on it, is diversity is a feature, not a bug.
Yes.
Right. And
yes,
what I mean by that is we have historically, because of the governance of our organizations, been set up to compete with each other around standardized roles, boxes, responsibilities, whatever it is.
Yes. Yes.
And we can't celebrate the differences in that structure. And if you can reorient people and say, oh my God, this diversity is fantastic. Like,
yes,
God, like you're awesome. And I don't need to be with you. And I don't need to compete with you on that. And in fact, I cannot compete with you on that.
Absolutely.
And that's great.
Absolutely.
I think that's a hard mental space for a lot of people to get into, because we're so socialized to fit in boxes.
Well, and even as, you know, we talk a little bit about, you know, the organizational culture as well, like even like certain departments I've seen just in my professional experience, you know, heard anecdotally, like departments are competing against each other. And it's like, we should really be cross collaborative in our methodologies and our ways of working with each other, as opposed to, it should be about how can we work together so that pieces of everyone's objectives, ideally the whole objectives, would be accomplished. But I mean, it's the same like with community as well, right? You know, like I really do believe that community is the manifestation of an organization's digital culture. And that is pervasive in even the departments and how they're interacting with each other. How do you get, you know, marketing on board, or how do you get a communications or professional development? Like those key business components, like if we don't highlight, if we're not being inclusive with them or highlighting like, this is great, you get visibility into X. You like, I mean, that's part of it as well. And it manifests itself in on the online space all the time.
To me, part of the fallacy of all of this, the system drives the behavior, right? So it's the metrics we have that drives the competitive. So change the metrics. We'll change the behavior. And instead, we tend to blame each other. Like as individuals, like you did this. Well, of course you did this because that's how you're being rewarded. So if you don't change the rewards, fundamentally all those cultural things, whether it's DEI or something else, what do you want?
Right.
Invest in those big structural things, because those are the, like any change we make in a little team is going to get wiped out when the people change. If the structural stuff,
absolutely. It's addressing those, you know, kind of systemic issues with culture change. I mean, like, you know, DEI is definitely like a manifestation of that, but it's interesting to kind of see how it continues, you know, to unfold. And that's why I take such a good look at, you know, change management, and, you know, that stakeholder identification piece is important. And when you're like building those cross-functional teams, I've really had to consult people on like taking a step back, like, who's at the table? Yeah. Let's start with the table. Who do we have at the table? Is anybody missing? That's a very simple practice that people can implement, very tangible, like right now, like when you're trying to work on something, are you being inclusive in who you're even tapping on the shoulder or who you're even approaching?
You know what I love too is, I think it's a Jewish tradition where they set a place at their is it Rosh Hashanah, Hanukkah table, or a gap.
I have to Google that. That sounds interesting.
There's a missing person.
Okay.
Like it, and it's been incorporated in some business practices, but like in the business world, it's like having that empty chair at the table to symbolize the customer, or like if you don't have that person that you can bring in that represents something important.
Yes.
And you symbolically make space for it.
Symbols are very important. Yeah, that's one of those tangible things for culture, as we know.
Well, this has been a fabulous conversation. We need to wrap up. And before I let you go, I like to just ask what's caught your attention in the last week or two. Like, what's one last thing you can leave us with that's that you found interesting?
I mean, what's really caught my attention is just, again, the necessity for self-care and making space for yourself. Like, you know, with the pandemic, you know, I'm in Illinois and I keep seeing like the cases are rising. They've shut down like internal dining. And it's really just been about, you know, as we're going into the holidays, like it's November, which I can't believe, right? So there's like Thanksgiving, there's Christmas, there are all these things. Just take the time for yourself and be okay within that space. I've been really focusing on the self-care because I think during the pandemic, I wasn't focusing on it as much. And what are we in, like month 7? So really guarding against your own burnout is really important to me in the past few weeks, because I've been starting to feel it, hence the puppy.
Yes. And I guess I may not frame it that way, but like what I've been, that meeting I had this week was reflective of it, which is I've got to spend my time working anyway, but how can I make that time joy-filled? Meaning,
yes,
like you can either work like a vanilla, like you do, or you can really lean into like enjoying the people you're working with. And it makes a huge difference. So like, can we be more present around making that happen?
Absolutely.
So that's my takeaway this week, because this week was crazy for everybody.
It's the world, you know, we have it with elections and everything that's happening, like just make space for yourself, or whatever that looks like, and find
people, invite them in, because together having fun is better than even isolated fun.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, Ashley, thank you so much. This was
thank you.
Enjoy. Is it Rogue?
Rogue is her name. Yeah, a little X-Men reference.
I think you know. I mean, you might be projecting trouble for yourself with that name, but we'll see. Hopefully she won't continue to be Rogue all the time.
Hopefully not all the time. Yes. But she's, like I said, 8 weeks old, but thank you guys so much for inviting me. I always love being with you guys. And, you know, I look forward to other connections.
Absolutely. Have a great weekend. Thanks,
Thank you so much. You too. Bye-bye.